Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Ball is Round. I'm Hady Raphael, and tonight on the show, Hernan Lozada released from his duties as coach of CF Montreal, the continuation of our post-mortem with midfielders and forwards, and Mauro Biello chooses his squad for the quarterfinals of the Concacaf Nations League. That and a lot more on episode 155 of The Ball is Round. And here we are back for another Sunday night where we're going to discuss CF Montreal, the Canadian national teams, and everything. I'm joined by my friends, Eve Powell. Hey, Eve, how are you?
Doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm fine. You're very happy today, which is very weird for me. And
Clearly,
of
you don't
course,
follow the Wolverhampton Wanderers then.
exactly. And then, of course, Elias Grigoriadis. Elias, how are you, man?
Not too bad. I mean, Barcelona also won today, so I'm in a good mood.
Yeah, exactly. And we need also to, because we do cover Montreal and soccer in Montreal, but also it's always nice to see our city, achieving something. And I just want to make sure that we just underline the fact that the Alouettes qualified for the Grey Cup final yesterday, and by beating the Toronto Argos on the other football. So winning in Toronto on BMO Field, so that's always a good
another win on BMO Field. It's nothing new, right?
Exactly. So yeah, congrats to them, to everybody that follows football. I'm not a big football fan, but always appreciate a good story here in Montreal, and it's really nice to see one of our professional teams really going very far and trying to win another trophy against the Blue Bombers. I think
please don't ask me.
Exactly. No, I was asking Elias. I wasn't asking you. So congrats for the Alouettes, and that's about it. We're not going to talk about European soccer because I really don't feel like it, because my team lost. So so guys, let's go straight into the first subject because we have a lot on our plate today. First, I want to apologize to our good friend Tate Brooks that really sent us a question last week and weren't really able to answer it. We forgot to answer it. And his question was that it seemed like the team is taking a long time to make a decision on Coach Lozada. You know what? You got your answer. So on Thursday, the 9th of November, CF Montreal announced that it parted ways with head coach Hernan Lozada effective immediately. And that's a statement, following the assessment of the season, it was determined the decision is in the club's best interest for 2024 and beyond. Assistant coach Sebastian Seti has also been relieved of his duties. The club wishes to thank both Hernan and Sebastian for the contribution over the past year. The selection process for CF Montreal's next head coach for the 2024 season is actively underway. Guys, Eve, let's start with you. Not shocking, not really surprising, but let's answer Tate's question in another way. Why did it take that long, in your opinion?
I think, obviously you need to actually announce to the employee that they're fired, right? And that's the only dignified way to go about it. So that conversation obviously had to take place. And I'm sure that there are probably negotiations, because he did have a contract for next year. So I'm sure that there were certain negotiations that had to take place regarding what sort of compensation he would get for having his contract terminated by the club. And those little behind the scenes machinations, if you will, that probably made things appear that they were taking longer. But I think, whether it was in the postseason media availability or in those other interviews that we have seen from whether it was Gervais, whether it was Renard, I think the writing had been pretty much on the wall regardless.
Exactly. And talking about media availability, I'm not sure if Elias, you were there at Olivier
Was there.
Renard's presser. Just tell us a bit about it. How was the mood there? Was everybody like kind of, nobody was really shocked, I believe. But what was the mood there between journalists? And of course, tell us a bit more about the presser.
No, nobody was too surprised, and even when we talked about it, and I said that I think he should come back. I wouldn't have been surprised if he had been let go. And Olivier Renald's reasoning for it kind of reinforced that, right? He talked about how this philosophy is what the style we want to play, and that wasn't the case. And so Hernan Losada went all in on his vision of the game. And you know what? Credit to him, he believed in himself and the way that he wanted to play. The thing is, he played his way and he lost. And I believe that if he had played, Olivier Renald's way and lost, he would still be with the club. So it's as simple as that. And he really did, kind of reinforce that was the 99% of the reason, right? Yes, you could point at the issues with some of the players and stuff like that, but the main reason it was purely down to philosophy. He said that it had nothing to do with competence and
Yeah.
his ability as a coach, and that's true because we've seen Hernan Losada, he understands tactics and he knows the game very well. It's just that his style did not mix with Olivier Renald's philosophy, and clearly did not mix with the overall group. But
Yeah,
or,
and Olivier Renard said something that was really interesting. He said it's not only about results, and he had to take everything into consideration.
Mhm.
He did talk about the players. He did speak with a few players, but they're not. And he said they're not the ones controlling and deciding, but it's a part of the discussion, which is important. He also talked quite a few times about the style of play that doesn't suit his project and the project that CF Montreal wants to put ahead on the page, which is something else. So not a lot of things went, you know, into Lozada's way in a certain way, right? Like
yeah.
it feels like did he like I'm gonna be very blunt there,
Mhm.
but did he lie in his interview saying, I'm able to play that way, and then he wasn't able to put it in place after? Like, is it a possibility, Eve? Because I see you're making you're
I'm
making the
like,
face, but like
well, I'm like,
because uh,
I think
Olivia Renard
everybody
said it quite a
embellishes in a job interview.
yeah, but there's something when you embellish and then when you do completely the opposite. When you're saying that you're going to play possession game football and you're going to play like
Yeah.
the beautiful
Yeah.
game and everything, and then during the whole season, during a whole
You do not do
year,
that.
you do not,
Yeah.
you don't do that. It's a bit weird.
Yeah, and maybe it's like my desire not to kick a guy while he's down or something like that. But in the early part of the season, there were so many players who were injured. Obviously, there were players whose kind of question was a little bit in status, and so, or sorry, status was a little bit in question, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I wonder if he didn't oversell himself. I think outright lying, because as a coach, at the end of the day, there are tapes of your tactics, in evidence, right?
Yeah, but like maybe he was able to produce something in Belgium with Beer Scott that wasn't able to produce in DC too. So I don't know. Yeah,
I don't know
I
what he produced in DC other than like discord and disharmony.
To be fair, the first year they made the playoffs. It was the second half of the season that
yeah.
was
It's
a
true.
bit of a disaster.
Now we do have a question from Roberto, and Roberto always tells us that we go too long on our pause, and then he asks questions. Now I'm joking, Roberto. Please continue on asking questions. Begs the question: why was he hired? Like Elias, can you answer, Roberto?
Look, I mean, it's first of all, I think that connection with the Belgian league is evident, right? Olivier Renard does have a certain fondness for his home country and his domestic championship. He played there, and he certainly knows the landscape very well. That's where he got Jean saying. That's where he got Jean for, and that's not where he got directly or
Mhm.
Losada, but both as a player and a manager, he evolved there. So I think that he has a pretty good idea of at least the Belgian version of Hernan Losada and maybe what he was kind of hoping would be brought here. So I think that, all that does kind of lean into why he may have had a leg up in terms of any kind of considerations.
Right.
But at the same time, it's if you look at that DC team, they did have some really nice spells of
Yeah,
play, and I
yeah,
think that maybe there was this idea that with the right group, maybe something could be sparked, and I genuinely think that there was some potential there. I think that even from Hernando Sada's perspective, he talked about at the beginning of the season that he wants to play a possession style of play. And I think that, maybe that disaster of a beginning of the season just made him completely reevaluate, his priorities and the way he wants to
yeah.
go
But
about it.
then,
And it's very possible.
but
Because
then the
remember,
end.
at that point, they didn't have a full squad until
Yeah,
the
but like,
last month
June.
yeah,
of the
you're
season.
right. You're right. But how do you explain then the last 9 games with only one win? Like, because we are pointing the beginning of the season, but we're not really thinking about the end of the season where you should have found your groove in a certain way, right? So, and he did it.
But I think the problem is that they didn't find the groove because they never had the chance to at the same time. Because even you have your home games and
Elias,
you find your
Elias,
form, but
man,
you're so
when you play so
generous.
poorly,
you're
no,
too
this is not
nice,
me being generous. This is me trying to find a reason. You asked me what the reason was. I think the
man.
reason is when you play so poorly on the road on such a consistent basis, it is impossible to develop momentum. It doesn't matter how good you are at home. When you play
Mm-hmm.
so negatively and so poorly on the road, and
Yeah,
half your games are on the road, it doesn't matter if you are amazing at home. Eventually, that poor form on the road is going to bleed into your form at home and not the other way around. So I think that they were kind of hoping that them playing well at home would kind of bleed into them maybe using some of that momentum on the road. But
it never worked.
it was the other way around.
Yeah,
That poor form at the end of the season, it's because we start to see the away CF Montreal started showing up at Stade Saputo, which is, I think it's obviously the exact opposite of what they intended.
yeah. Interesting. Now he's gone.
Yep.
That's going to be very interesting to see the rest and the following weeks, because I'm pretty sure that Olivier Renard is going to have to take a decision very quickly, because you need to make sure to have a squad ready for January. And January is coming very, very quickly. And you do have a lot of decisions right now to take, of course, and that takes us directly to the other question that was asked to us from Amin Sabri, which is really interesting. If you can just pull
Oh,
it
sorry.
up,
Yep. Just give me one sec.
Eve.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
I mean, I clicked. Oh,
Did you? Yeah. Okay.
I did.
So, what are your predictions for the options that will be activated or declined? Remember last year we were surprised that Yao and Pentemis options were declined by Renard. Of course, Pentemis was re-signed right after, not Yao, who went to Vancouver. So we do have, I think, 7 players that have options. So we have Pentemis, we have Logan Ketterer, we have Torkelson, Zachary Bogia, Usman Jabang, Jujea Quizera, Sunis Ibrahim, and Joaniel Assi. So 8 players, sorry. So, just we can go fast and just answer which options would you exercise, Elias, aside with you this time, and which you wouldn't.
I think it's easier to go through the ones that I wouldn't renew.
Okay.
I think that, the only ones that I wouldn't take up are Quizera and Thorkelson. I understand that Thorkelson does have a very unique position, given that, it's an international status, it's U21 status. But at some point, just for the good of both you and the player, if you are committed to this player's development, you have to at some point cut your losses and you have to let go of that line. I think those are the only 2 that I think, same thing with George Quizera. Couldn't find any minutes. Now it's just 2 different managers where he had some bad luck with injuries, but the majority of the season he was healthy and he just did not play. And I think that this is 2 different managers with 2 different styles now, where he did manage to break into the team. And, at least under Wilfried Nancy, he managed to find some minutes as a sub. But under Hernando Sada, it's,
Interesting.
So I think that those are the 2 that, thank you. But
no,
it makes no sense to continue with the club. No.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I would add 2 more, which are Pentemis and Zachary Bokia. For me, Pentemis should be a number 1. I don't think it's good for him to be a number 2, and I don't think it's good for the group to have a number 2 like Pentemis, who was a number 1 at one point. And the second thing is Zachary Bourguillard. I think he's just not going to be interested to be here anymore because he wants a number one spot, and he's not. Aaron Herrera is in front of him right now, so that's the other two that I would not exercise their options. Eve, anything?
No, I'm actually 100% on your side on this one, Hady. Maybe for Zachary Broguiard, like I said, I could see him having enough attachment now, like where he has a child here and so on and so forth, to sticking around. But I agree that for James Pantemis to kind of have a hope of progressing his career beyond backup level, he absolutely needs a change of scenery. And if Zachary Broguiard does want a starting spot, then 100%, once again, change of scenery is required.
Let's wait and see what will be the decisions of Olivier Renard. We do have one other question, and it's from Émile Archambault, who's asking a question that's going to be very, very tough to answer. What does Renard or Gervais need to do to avoid a repeat of the Losada failure? Is it just a question of try again, get it right, or does the CF Montreal need to do things differently? By the way, I haven't listened to the postmortem yet. Ignore if you've already covered it. We haven't covered yet Olivier Renard. We're leaving it for next week. We're going to have a special guest, hopefully next week, and we're going to be able to answer the Olivier Renard performance this season. But I think we can answer at least this question from Émile Archambault. Eve, you can start. I'll jump in after.
Oh boy. I mean, I think finding kind of that magical formula with a coach. I mean, there's so many moving pieces when it comes to hiring a coach, because you have to look at the players that are available and kind of the general vibe of your locker room versus the style of football that you want to see displayed, versus, how much time you want your coach to give to those academy and up and coming players, which we know in Montreal is very, very high. So it's really difficult to say. I do think that I'm hoping anyway that Renard is going to learn that kind of a coach who has more of a player first mentality compared to Losada, and maybe who has a little bit better of a reputation in managing a locker room, in kind of controlling those big personalities and those leaders who can kind of bring players onto their side for and against the coach, is looked at maybe a little bit harder, because as we know, Losada came in with not the greatest track record in that regard. And we've seen other Montreal coaches who have also come in with similar kind of questionable histories in the other teams that they've coached also not succeed when they haven't been, say, quote unquote, a player's coach. So that's one thing that I'm hoping that they look at a lot more going forward. But overall, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you do have to go back to the drawing board and say, like, what is our priority when it comes to bringing a coach in?
Of course, yeah, of course. You need to make sure that you go back to the drawing board and you make sure to ask the right questions. What went wrong? How can we not reproduce that again? For sure, 100%. Exactly. Elias, do you have a different answer than Eve, or are there other metrics that you look at before taking a decision, if you had to take the decision yourself?
No, I just think this is a case of they expected something from a coach that they thought that they had seen. They thought they saw the style of play in Losada, and clearly they were mistaken. I think that next time they should be, if something like this were to happen again with a manager where they're starting to veer off course and not really following the philosophy of the club, then they'll be a bit more proactive and try and get in front of it sooner, right? Than just be at the end of the season, well, he didn't play the style of play that we wanted him to play. You are the sporting director and you meet with him, I'm assuming, fairly often. So the fact that this was not a surprise from you, and in fact, after the first month, it should have been very clear that they're not playing the same way Wilfried Nancy was playing. No. So I think that has to be something I want to I'd like to see a bit more practice. Again, we don't know about how often Olivier Renard maybe reinforce the fact that, like, hey, we are a club that wants to play possession football and want to play beautiful football, and we're not aware. And look, Olivier Renard was not going to comment on that kind of dynamic that he had with Losada. Obviously not. But I think that you have to go with a coach that has a proven track record of playing this style at a number of different clubs and also in a number of different situations. I don't want a coach that's, played only with the best players and then walks through a club. Because, then you could play whatever style you want when you have the best team in the league. So I'd love to see someone that has a proven track record of building up a club and then, enforcing the style of play.
Interesting. I wanted to add something else to those answers because I agree with both of you. Looking at CF Montreal history since they joined MLS, the only positive seasons that they had was the one where we reached the conference finals. It was under Morobiello. We have the one where we reached the Champions League final was under Frank Lopez. And we had the one with Wilfried Nancy last year, finishing second in the league also. And when I look at that, you see something that's very similar. First of all, someone that's adapted to North America and the MLS. They know the MLS. They know everything about the MLS already. They're not really surprised by the long trips, by the mentality that's different, the way of play that's different, the fact that you go to RSL, you're playing something a different team than when you go into Columbus, where you play completely, it's different way of playing soccer. So that's the first thing. And two of the three were, in a certain way, people from Montreal, from the Montreal culture, from Montreal soccer scene.
Okay.
Wilfried Nancy and Morobiello. So in my opinion, I think we should go with someone that's really been here for a while, knows Canadian soccer, knows MLS, but knows MLS not really coaching in MLS. I would go with it's funny because Patrick Wright said it. Let the Bobby rumors begin. And you know what? And for me, it shouldn't be only a rumor. Bobby Smirniotis, I think, should be really considered for this job because he did build. He's going to check all the boxes in a certain way. He did build Sigma FC from the ground up, right? So he did, and we know a lot of players that really went from Sigma to the Canadian national team. Kyle Larin is one of them.
Yeah.
Second of all, he does have that culture of winning because he did win 4 out of 5 CPL seasons. And third of all, he does have the local aspect of it because his assistant is none other than Kit Silaidopoulos that we hosted here on The Ball Is Round at one point. And he knows everything about the Montreal and the Quebec soccer scene. So, which is something that's very, very interesting and very, very important. And when you're building a project like CF Montreal is trying to do around the talent from here, the Montreal talent, I think you need that sort of coach that believes in the talent here in Montreal, within the academy and so on. So I think it would be interesting to go with a choice that's not really bling bling, but the kind of choice that usually brings results to this team in MLS and in other competitions. I see that Eve is dying to answer or to add something. Am I wrong?
No, not at all. I agree with you on the philosophy standpoint 100%. It's invaluable that the coach has experience. And unfortunately, Bobby Smirniotis doesn't have a ton of, CPL has a lot of grueling travel in and of itself. I mean, traveling from, Halifax to whether it's Victoria, whether it's Vancouver is, it's not a walk in the park by any stretch. Exactly. And the other oddities of the league that I won't even start with. No, I wholeheartedly agree that he should be in consideration 100% if he has any interest to leave a club where he has basically forged a dynasty by this point, no pun intended. 100%. Yeah. I mean, he's gotten forged to play extremely attractive football in the CFL. God, you shouldn't get me started on CFL. In the CPL. In the CPL. definitely brought out the best in a lot of players, I think, that have been under his tenure. So no, I'm all for those rumors, 100%. And like you said, if some of the assistant coaches, such as Kit, who was a lovely guest on The Ball is Round, come along, then they bring that Montreal knowledge and experience with them of the unique market that is Montreal.
Yeah.
So all the better, but we'll see.
We'll
In
see.
the immortal words of Hady, let's wait and see.
Let's wait and see. Exactly. Elias, we do have, of course, Bobby Smirnotti. I said he checks all the boxes. Unfortunately, he doesn't speak French. He does have an assistant that speaks French, so that might help. So let's wait and see. But do you have anything to add on what Eve just added herself?
Yeah, I mean, Bobby Smirnotti ticks every box. He was my favorite after Nancy had left, and I think that he would be a great fit now. One thing, Quentin Parizis, who we all know and love, brought up two very, very good points. One is, at Forge FC, Bobby Smirnotis is not only the head coach, but he's also the sporting director.
Yeah.
What he says goes, and he
has a lot of
has
latitude.
complete control over the direction of this program. And he would have to make a lot of concessions, a lot of compromises in moving to Montreal and having to work with it. It could work, but at the same time, people butt heads. Even if people have the same philosophy of play, people sometimes don't agree. Another important point that Quentin brings up is, by CPL standards, Forge is top. They have they have excellent players. You have the ability to play this beautiful style of play. Moving to Montreal, by MLS standards, Montreal does not have as good a squad as Forge does by CPL standards, which means it is going to be a bit of an adjustment. And
for sure,
I'm very curious to see how he's going to do that, because we do know how good he is at building up a club. We saw it on a number of occasions. But that is also another really important thing to consider. And Quentin brings up two very good points that, from a Montreal perspective, there's no boxes that Bobby Smirnotis doesn't tick. But from a Bobby Smirnotis perspective, there are certain things that he would need assurances on before he hops on board.
That's interesting. We'll see. But he also knows a lot the Canadian Premier League, and that might help with the budget of CF Montreal, saying, you know what, I know this player, they can play at a higher level, and they can be some good rotation players, and he can help also give some tips and to Olivier Renard and his team. So that's also a possibility. But let's wait and see, as Yves mentioned a few seconds ago. And I think let's move on to the postmortem and the rest of the evaluations of CF Montreal players that played in 2023. Let's start with none other than Bryce Duke. So we're going to do midfielders and strikers. So Bryce Duke, that we had also on The Ball is Round on an interview. If you guys want to go listen, please feel free to do so. It's always available. Bryce Duke, guys, is he or is he not the next big thing? Yves, do you think that he could take the place of Georgi Mihailovic at one point? Maybe, of course, he can do that this year, but does he have that potential, in your opinion? And how do you rate him this season out of 10, of course?
I mean, I always feel I really, really hate trying to kind of shoehorn one player into, being almost an identical replacement, if you will, to another player, because at the end of the day, they are two different individuals with two different, not only playing styles, but, just experience in general. So at the end of the day, like, there's a part of me that really hates it. But I understand why the question gets asked.
Like, do you think he can have the same impact?
Yes. Do you? Yeah.
No pun intended either.
I mean, we saw flashes, we saw flashes of a player who has that IQ, who has that vision, and who has, the creativity. He has passing range. He has technique. He has so many of the tools already in his toolbox. It's just a matter of kind of, honing them and sharpening them and making things work. And I think probably the musical chairs situation in the striker position also didn't necessarily help a player like Bryce Duke this season, because trying to serve, players who weren't in form, players who are coming and going from the lineup, I don't think that helps players who are trying to establish their place in a lineup. So I mean, like, to answer your question with like a yes or no, I feel like we kind of need to know what's going on up ahead of Bryce Duke before we can say.
Interesting.
Before we can say definitively. And I know that it kind of sounds like I'm equivocating it and not trying to give an answer. So at the end of the day, I'm going to say yes, with the caveat if Montreal can stabilize their attacking line.
Interesting.
And my grade.
You're great. Very important.
I will go for a 5.5 out of 10, I think.
Okay. Interesting. That's a good grade, I think, in my opinion, for Bryce Duke.
You're a hard grader. I was a really nice teacher back when I taught the small children.
Go ahead, Elias. Give us your take on Bryce Duke.
I'm actually going to surprise you guys and give him only a 5.
Oh, wow!
For a number of reasons. I do think he brought a lot of really good stuff, and I do think that there's a very high ceiling for him. We've seen what he can do at his best. The problem is that there still is the issue of consistency that we haven't seen from him, that we've seen from younger players and less MLS experienced players, which is the bigger reason why his grade is that low for me. I think that, when he's on it, and we've seen it a number of times, as Saputo, when he's on it, he is on it, and he is virtually unplayable when he's feeling good. The thing is, we haven't seen him feel that way in a while, especially in the final runs to the games where he saw his position basically vanish, right? They just didn't play with the 10 anymore. And, when the team is playing better without your position being even in the formation, then obviously you're going to struggle for minutes, and obviously it's not going to look that great on you. So I think that with a new coach that maybe wants to bring back a 10 or maybe even an inside forward kind of thing where, we saw it under Wilfried Nancy where George Mihailovic and Joaquin Torres played almost as inside forwards sometimes, and they played as both 10s and wingers, just in those half spaces. I think Bryce Duke could find something that suits him well, because there's not a lot of running. It's a lot of judging the spaces, which he does very well. It's a lot of very close, very tight spaces work, which is, in his wheelhouse. So I'm going to give him a 5 for this year, but that's also because, formation was just not for him. He's not an 8. He's a 10, and they weren't playing with a 10.
Interesting. I like Tate's comment. Agree, Duke was not consistent, but that can happen with younger players. Yep. Looking forward to him growing. Completely agree with you. And I think one thing that you guys didn't talk about, I think he needs to work on his physicality. I think he's a bit. It's hard for him to accelerate with the ball. He needs to be better accelerating with the ball. When he gets the ball, he needs to go faster, but also he needs to make sure when he loses the ball to do that extra effort to go and win that ball back in a certain way, and also making sure to play a bit faster. I felt that at times the play was a bit too fast for him. MLS was a bit too fast for him, but his technical abilities are there. And as you said, Eve, his vision is really, really interesting. He's very creative. That's really nice, but he needs to make sure that he works on his physicality during the off season and comes to the training camp in January, really prepared, faster, maybe work on his legs a bit more, because he needs to have, quicker acceleration. That's going to be very interesting. My grade, I would agree with Elias with a 5 out of 10. But I do see potential. And I can't wait to see him next year, to see him grow, as Tate says. So 5 out of 10, that's the grade of TBIR for Bryce Duke.
Mark your calendars. This is the day that Eve was the nicest of the three of us.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, man, Elias. Thanks for the pun. Moving on, Ahmed Hamdi. This year
he got 500 minutes.
Yes, he did. He did get 500 minutes.
He had those like 2 or 3 starts. I remember that probably did a.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, you're probably right.
So, Elias, your turn. What do you think about Ahmed Hamdi?
I mean, I feel bad for him because the second he got into good form, he conceded that penalty in the Canadian Championship final against Vancouver, and then he was not seen from again until like Atlanta, I think.
Yeah, for a while.
So
It was a while.
It was it was a while, which is why a lot of people, including myself, are probably surprised he played 500 minutes, but he did.
573 all competitions included.
Whew.
So
Just squeezed in there.
Just. But yeah,
Exactly.
look, I think that, you know, there's some good stuff, but the problem is there's just not enough good stuff to make him stand out. I think the problem is that we've seen it from a lot of players, and most notably like Jonathan Yvidsin and Bryce Duke when he first got here, is this lack of complacency when it comes to just like treading water, right? And Ahmed Hamdi is perfectly fine treading water. He doesn't make too many mistakes, but he just doesn't stand out. And when you have a 10, especially in MLS, you can't have a 10 that just is there, you know.
He's
kind of
more of
blending
a
in.
Nate. He's more of
Yeah, but
a
he was
Nate
played as a 10.
facilitator, but
Yeah,
He was played as a 10 though.
You're
right.
right. You're right.
Right.
You're
So regardless of what he is, what he was played as a 10. And he wasn't bad. He just wasn't good. He was just there. Right. And
Yeah.
yes, relatively mistake free, which is why you're not going to give him a 0.
Yeah.
But when you're invisible, you're invisible. And as a 10 and as an attacking player, especially if you don't have too many purely attacking players, if you're not standing out, then you're not doing your job. I'm giving him 3.5.
Oof.
And that's purely on lack of time, right?
Wow.
Because when he did play, we saw some good things. But the thing is, too often,
Elias, man, who are you, man? Where's Elias? Like usually he's the generous one. Like what's going on?
Well, yeah. I'm getting it generous later. Don't worry. I know who's coming up. So
you're the guy that gave Lozada 6, right? So
6.5.
I stand
by that. We're not going to get into this. We're not going to get into this because we'll be here all night.
Yeah, I know.
But it's a 3.5 purely because, like you said, 573 minutes, right? Yeah. If we had 1,000 minutes of Ahmed Hamdi, it'd probably be higher. But the thing is, we saw only that many minutes, and he was, you know, just there for so many of them that, you know.
Interesting. Interesting. I'm just gonna say just a few words on Ahmed Hamdi. I think we didn't really see unfortunately we didn't have the chance to see the real Ahmed Hamdi, in my opinion. I feel that yes, he got his chance, but every time that he had a good game, either with Nancy or with Losada, unfortunately he wasn't back on the pitch for 2, 3, 4, 5 games. Every time he had a chance, he did well. The game after he wasn't really good. Then the third game he was off. And he didn't have those consistent minutes in order to prove himself. And also, you know, I don't think he was fit most of the time, which is really not good. I think Ahmed Hamdi needs to be meaner. I feel that he's just too nice. And unfortunately, when you play in midfield as a midfielder, as a number 10, nice doesn't cut it, unfortunately. Like you need to make sure that, you know, you take your place, that you need to push players. You need to be able to make your place there. And I don't think he had it in him to be a bit meaner in MLS. And I think that's why he never really was able to up his game in a certain way. My grade would be a 4 out of 10. Again, too many minutes. But again, I think that if he finds another club, he's out of contract right now. So if he finds another club within MLS, maybe he can be a good player. But I don't think he's a bad player either. So 4 out of 10 for me. Eve?
Yeah. By and large, I do agree with the points that both of you made. You know, being played out of his probably true position didn't necessarily do him any favors. But that being said, when he was given an opportunity, you know, he played it rather safe and he kind of just blended in with the scenery, which agree is not going to be a difference maker player. And Montreal needs to get the most out of its players. He is one of the higher paid players on the squad at the end of the day.
No.
So yeah, for me,
as Tate said, he was paid $1 a minute.
More than $1 a minute. He made more than $573 this season. I would sincerely hope.
$1,000 a minute.
Yeah, $1,000 a minute.
Yeah, he said $1, but I think he meant $1,000.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. Yeah, I need to sign up. I clearly need to sign up. I've joined the wrong profession.
Job? Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, yeah, and I think ever since really he joined Montreal, unfortunately, fitness and injuries have kind of been a little bit of a concern for him. And part of that probably has contributed to his ability to find consistency or lack thereof. But you're judged on your performances. You have to show up when you're called upon. If you don't get called upon, you may not get 3 or 4 or 5 matches in a row to kind of build yourself up, if you will, right? You have to take the moment that you're given. And unfortunately, he didn't do that. So for me, it's going to be a 4 out of 10.
Okay, so 4 out of 10. We're agreeing too much, I think, Eve
I'm
and I
sorry.
today. So 4 out of 10
Not
for
helpful.
Ahmed Hamdi for sure. Moving on will be Chinonso 4. We're gonna do we do midfielder? Yeah, we're just gonna do that randomly.
We'll do them in the list that they appear in our
Exactly.
images here. So it's going to be a surprise for everyone.
Exactly. So Chinonso 4. I'll start.
Oh God, this is the one I've been dreading the most. So go for it.
I would go with a 4 out of 10.
Okay.
The reason behind it is that, yes, the main job of a striker is to put the ball in the back of the net, which he doesn't do enough, of course, and he's not very, very good at it. But the other things that he does are kind of interesting, and he needs to build on that. He needs to build on that physicality, the heading abilities that he has, but also he needs to build on his movement off the ball. If he's able to learn a thing or two about movement off the ball, like without the ball, I think he can be a very interesting striker. Because at the end of the day, if you want to put the ball in the back of the net, you need to make sure to be in the right positions at the right times, which he's not most of the time. Now, I'm asking myself the question, maybe Losada ball was not really the kind of play that he's used to, and very, he didn't really understand the way Losada wanted him to move. That's a possibility too. But I don't think that it's a player that doesn't have a future as a striker in Montreal or elsewhere. I think he has some very interesting abilities. He just needs to hone them in a certain way, and he needs to learn a thing or two of about positioning and off the ball work, where he has a lot of work to do. And 4 out of 10. Disappointed. I was hoping for better for him, but I'm interested in seeing him next season to see if he can grow, if he can learn a thing or two. But I'm a bit skeptical, to be honest. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt for next season. Eve?
Okay. I'm trying to follow you up without eviscerating someone.
Everybody's saying 3.
Yeah.
Robbie and Gail.
Yeah, and that's going to be the number that I work with is 3. And that is the number that I'm going to give Chinonso for. So once again, there is a part of me that feels a bit bad because he was thrust into that starting striker position early in the season with Ramel Kyoto's injury and other departures from the team. And it's abundantly clear that he's not ready. I'm not convinced he'll ever be ready for that role in MLS. To me, the foundational elements, ball to feet, are just so far behind.
Yeah.
That I don't see it. Like, if another club is willing to sign the player, like even on a free whatever, let him go, quite frankly, is my opinion. I'm not necessarily invested in watching him try to develop further next season. The number of chances that he missed, his just general awareness, it got more and more frustrating. Like, I feel early on in the season, we were trying to be really gentle. We were trying to be a bit kind. We were kind of clutching at straws a little bit and being like, oh, but the hold up play and, back to goal and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But like you said,
First
Hady,
touch Yeah, the first touch
It's
is
pretty
bad.
tragic, yeah. And to me, that's just so basic, so fundamental, especially with the growth of MLS. Like, you could maybe get away with a first touch like that 7 years ago in MLS, but unfortunately not in this day and age. So for me, it's a 3 out of 10, and I expect he will be in Montreal next year because he is under contract. But if anybody wants to sign him, then I would hope that Olivier Renard would listen to their offer.
Elias.
Yeah, I have to disagree with Hady, and I kind of agree with Eve.
Wow.
Thank you.
I think
He's
that
on a mean
arguably,
streak.
I think that arguably, not in terms of score, but in terms of just reasoning. I think that I believe his off-ball play was the best part about him. I think that
Really?
he often found himself in good spots. The problem was the finishing, and with regards to his hold-up play, protecting the ball is 10% of the job, right?
I
Congratulations,
agree.
you could protect the ball, but now what do you do with it? And more often than not, the ball would go backwards. So you accomplish nothing by holding up play. As a target man, he was always in the right spot. The problem was finishing consistently. Even when he would get,
Or
he
God
got a
forbid he
brace,
wasn't close enough to the goal and he had to lay it off to someone else or control the ball.
so he got a brace against Toronto, I think, that's Saputo, right? But how many chances did he have, right?
Yeah.
He had at least a half dozen. So it also comes down to conversion rate. And if you're going to be a team like Losada was last year, where the chances are few and far apart, if you don't finish, you're going to get destroyed. So I think that I'm going to settle on a 4, because I do think, if I give Ahmed Hamdi a 3.5, I'm going to give Chonzo a 4-4. That's the way I go about it.
That's
I
all
think
good.
that
Not scientific.
ultimately, it couldn't be any higher than that. I don't think he'll be at the club next year. I think that, if he is at the club, it'll be, somewhat limited role, especially if they are trying to play possession. Because if you have someone coming up like Jean Yalassi, and you have someone like Sunusi Ibrahim who's getting along so well with Mahalo Poku, then there may just not be enough room for him other than as a substitute, looking for header, which I believe was his best role anyway. I didn't think he was anywhere near as good a starter as he was off the bench. Off the bench, he was, a force to be reckoned with.
I
but
would be
as a
I would be
starter,
curious, like if his role had been limited to a sub role, I would be really curious as to what our assessment would have been.
it would be much
And
more
that's why I
positive.
say,
I
like,
can
it's a
guarantee
little
that.
bit unfair.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Interesting. I don't disagree with you guys. Honestly, I think he had a bigger role than what we thought he would at the beginning of the season. So
Should,
there's
honestly.
there's a small jab here from Chan to myself, so I'm just gonna say it. 04 equals Mitroglou when he was at OM. I agree with you, Chan. If you guys have
Mitroglou is a national hero.
yeah,
Watch
but
your
like,
mouth. We have beef now.
But
We have beef now.
he was
Oh, no.
really bad at OM.
National hero.
Really bad at OM.
I don't care.
Bad
I don't care
at OM.
how I don't care how bad he was. National hero. Chan and I have beef now.
He is.
No.
National
He is a
hero.
national hero. He is a national hero for Greece, of course. And
Yeah.
you just made the Elias really mad now.
Yeah.
I'm
Chan.
so sad now.
He has Greek origins, so be careful. Be careful.
And
Moving
to
on.
answer Chan's question,
Yeah.
though, because he did ask a question, how much? So it was $325,000 of GAM, and then an additional $275,000 was based on performance-based metrics. I would be kind of surprised if he met those performance-based metrics as well. But just as an aside, Chicago, I think, paid 04 salary in 2022, which is kind of a moot point in 2023 anyway.
So, not much. He didn't pay a lot for Chinon's 04 if we do the math together. So, so the final grade for Chinon's 04 is a 4 out of 10. Moving on with the next player, and that's Elias' turn, and then it's Samuel Piet, the team captain. Go ahead, Elias.
It's oof.
It's oof.
Look, at the end of the day, he has been a constant in this team forever. And I think that, short of Mathieu Chouanière, he was the team's best midfielder. just in terms of consistency, in terms of, grinta, in terms of being there.
As a leader too, as a captain.
And just as a leader, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what kind of turmoil there is. You can always look at Samuel Piet as the quintessential leader, both on and off the field. So he always leads by example. He always, gets everybody ready. And, there's not much to say about Samuel Piet that we haven't said over the course of the season. I am disappointed in the fact that, Losada Ball did limit his usage. We saw that under Wilfried Nancy, he had much more freedom going forward, and he was able to showcase a very impressive long ball ability and kind of very strong crosses. So I think that, him being relegated to a ball winner wasn't as great, but his talent is still there, and his talent is undeniable. I'm giving him a 7. And yeah, shy of Mathieu Choinière, he was the best midfielder of the season by far for me.
Interesting. I'll just so your grade?
7.
7 out of 10. I'll give my grade 6 out of
7.
10. Okay, sorry, I didn't hear it. I'll give my grade 6 out of 10. The reason behind it is very simple. Samuel Piet is, you know exactly what you're going to get from Samuel Piet. Don't expect him to dribble or to do whatever. Like, it's very simple what he does. He recuperates the ball. He wins the ball. He gives a small pass. He does a nice, he does switch the play very well from time to time too. And this is what you get from Samuel Piet. And he did just that. I think when you see a very good Samuel Piet is when the team is very, very good, which was not the case this year. So for me, 6 out of 10, because he did exactly what was asked from him. Unfortunately, he got injured, which doesn't really help his performance, but 6 out of 10 for me. Eve?
I'll also go for 6 out of 10 as well. Unfortunately, I think injury did also hamper him a bit this season. Definitely didn't help. And yeah, Lozada's style of play was, I don't think it showcased too many players' best abilities at the end of the day. But I will give him credit for speaking out and saying that he didn't feel that the team was adequately prepared, because that is what you need a captain to do at the end of the day sometimes, is to rattle that cage and to come out publicly and use your time with the press judiciously, which I think he did. So I believe he does deserve credit for that. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think we kind of saw a step back with Sam Piet, and he kind of got relegated to, say, the classic Sam Piet that we had known kind of from 2017 to 2020.
Interesting. So 6 out of 10 for Samuel Piet. I think we are going to see him for a few years here in Montreal, which is going to be always very interesting.
I would hope more than a few myself. But
exactly. Yeah. So moving on, Eve, your turn. Romel Kyoto. That's a tough one. But you can go full Eve. You can go full Eve when you talk about Romel Kyoto.
All right. So, I mean, his season, obviously, we've come to expect injuries for Romel Kyoto. It's what we've known every single year that he's played in Montreal, with the exception of 2022, really, right? And this year was no exception. I mean, he was called out by Renard for kind of just disappearing when he got injured, essentially. Although he was very active on social media, so we did all know where he was. I'm going to give him a 4 out of 10. That contributes a bit to professionalism. He was extremely impactful in that one match versus Philadelphia. Otherwise, yeah, I'm not sure. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go for a 3. He missed the majority of the season because he was injured. And I think after the whole, whatever the phrase Bernard used was, like, his tour of the world or whatever, I think at the end of the day, there was always going to be a question about his mentality and if his mind was really in Montreal. And again, I think Lozada's football didn't necessarily seek to take anybody's best out of them. But I don't know. It just didn't feel like it was there this year with Ramel Kyoto. So I'm going to land in the middle, actually, as you enjoy my stream of consciousness grading here. And I'm going to go for a 3.5 out of 10 because he was absent so very, very much this season. When he returned after injury, we didn't see the whole heck of a lot of him.
Elias.
Yeah. I'm going to give him a 4 for the same reason, right? When he was healthy, all the players were talking about how, especially the forward, were talking about how great of a leader for the forwards he was, and this big brother and this mentor role, and he kind of brought the best out of a lot of them. He pushed them forward, and it was very good. And the fact that, look, you heal the way you have to heal at the end of the day, right? Your body is your most important asset as an athlete, and you have to heal it the way that you feel best. But at the same time, you're absent for over 3 months. You will be, it'll be noticed, right? We talked about this in other episodes.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very young forward core without him. Mason Toy is the oldest one at like 20, 25, I think, right? 24,
And
25.
even, yeah.
Right. And he's the oldest one. And even he doesn't have a lot of MLS experience. He has the most MLS experience as forwards, and so they had to do a lot of growing on their own, and that showed. There was a lot of moments where there was a lack of experience. And someone like Ronald Kyoto, even if he was just on the bench, or in the dressing room at halftime, could have helped them a lot. So I think that because of that, your best quality is availability, and he wasn't available. So 4.
Interesting. I'm gonna be a lot harsher. For me, it's a 2 out of 10. And for me, the unprofessionalism of Ronald Kyoto for me is a big no-no. You are loved by the fans. You are loved by the club. The club has done a lot of things for you. The fans loved you, and really followed you everywhere. And you know, and the way he behaved during the year is unacceptable for me. And you look at his stats, and you know what? I'm just going to give you a few stats. In 2020, his first year with us, he played 25 games, all competitions included. He was able to score 10 goals. In 2021, he played 24 games, sorry. He was able to score 3 goals too. In 2022, he played 30 some games. He was able to score 15 goals. This year, he played 14 games. He was only able to score 3 goals with 1 assist, which is for me unacceptable. At the end of the year, when he came back from injury, we were expecting Ramel Kyoto to have that finishing touch to push us, to push us over the red line for a playoff spot. He was supposed to be that player. Unfortunately, he wasn't there. He wasn't good. He wasn't fit. He wasn't anything. He was anonymous most of the time on the pitch and off the pitch. So for me, it's unacceptable. You are the main striker, and you haven't behaved like a main striker. You haven't behaved as a good player either. We haven't seen anything from him in the past 9 games when he was back, or 6, 7, whatever games that he was back. And for me, this is unacceptable, because I understand that you're injured, but when you're back, I want you to give 110%, and I want you to have a clinical touch in front of goal, which he didn't. So 2 out of 10 for me. I was very, very disappointed by Ramel Kyoto this year. So that's my grade. So we have a 2, a 4 out of 10 from Elias, and Eve with a 3.5. So I think we're safe to go with a 3 out of 10 for Ramel Kyoto, which should be the average. Moving on with the next player, and that's your turn, my friend Elias, with Sean Rea. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we haven't seen him in so long.
Yeah, exactly. This is a very similar reaction to Bryce Dukes, right? Where when they're confident and he's feeling good. We saw a lot of moments, especially at the beginning of the year when everyone was injured, that he really did step up and he played in a much more mature way than we had expected, especially in the Canadian Championship. But, will we ever find out what happened between him and Hernán Losada? I doubt it. Let's just hope that this next coach does have a bit more room for him, because we know how good Sean Ray is. Everybody knows how good Sean Ray is. He's shown it, right? And not just at a CPL level, but, he's shown that his ceiling is so much higher, and he's done it at the MLS level as well in brief glances. So I'm gonna go with a 4, and that's purely because we just didn't see enough Sean Ray. And there were some moments where I found that he just like Ahmed Hamdi kind of slid back into the shadows a little bit and didn't really maybe assert himself enough. But for the most part, I think that, with a homegrown project like this and the kind of club that you're trying to be, he needs more minutes. So I think that it's a 4 purely on lack of minutes.
Interesting. I'll go next. By the way, he got 917 minutes, all competitions included. So
how many of that was in the first half of the season, though?
Exactly. I was going to say, how many came through July?
Exactly. You know what? I'm going to be a bit more generous. I would give him a 5 out of 10 for Sean Ray. The reason behind it is that, unfortunately, he didn't click with Hernán Losada after whatever that famous game when he was subbed off and he wasn't really pleased to be subbed off. But his play on the pitch was very interesting for a first-year rookie. I think it was very interesting. He's only 21. I think he has a lot of potential. I think he's fast. He's faster than Duke. He has good vision. He has a good shot on goal. The thing is, he just needs minutes. He needs confidence. He needs his coach to have confidence in him. And of course, he needs a bit more experience under his belt. So I of course, at times he was a bit lost on the pitch, and that's something that he needs to learn he needs to grow from and learn from it in a certain way. I'm very confident in the future of Sean Ray. I feel that he can be a complete player very, very quickly in MLS starting 2024 if he has the backing of his coach. So I would give him a 5 out of 10. Eve?
And I'll end in the middle just for fun. I'll go 4.5 out of 10. It is his first pro season. And so obviously there was going to be a little bit of growing pain for this player. Although I think it was really, really ridiculous that we didn't see him at all after the first week of July. Part of it is as well that you do need to manage your emotions to a degree. And you do need to comport yourself with a certain degree of professionalism. And so, although I definitely think that the response was very heavy-handed and not warranted, I also hope that was a valuable learning experience for him as a player. Obviously, he's coming from loans in CPL and from the academy, so he is, of course, adapting to MLS. And like you said, Hady, I do see a lot of potential. I do see a lot of growth ahead of this player. So I'm gonna roll with a 4.5 out of 10. And unfortunately, maybe I could give a better grade, I would feel more confident in my assessment if we had seen him in the last 3 months.
Yeah,
but we didn't.
Okay, so we don't have a 4.5 thing, so we're gonna do 4.
By the way, it's so much worse than just first week of July. So starting from early June, the last 21 games in all competitions that CF Montreal had, guess how many minutes he played? 21 games. Guess how many minutes he played?
He played
71.
No,
did you look it up?
He played 106.
You've cheated. You've cheated. You've cheated and looked it up.
I had already looked it up beforehand.
I looked it up.
71 minutes. He started against NYCFC.
Yep.
And that's it.
And that was it.
He played
the face of the earth.
He played on the 4th of June, 26 minutes.
Yes, and then
once
early
NYC
July
was
and then
July 2nd.
Yeah, July 2nd, exactly.
71 minutes in the last 21
Yeah, but
games
you
in
know
all
what?
competitions.
Again, as Eve said, I think it was very harsh from Losada. It's a young player.
Yeah.
I think that's not the way you
No.
teach young players. Okay, you put him on the bench for or out of the squad for 4 or 5 games. Okay, but then it's an interesting player. You play him. You need results. And yeah, no, I don't know. So 4.5 out of 10 for Sean Rea. Moving on with the next player, and that's gonna be me. That's gonna start, and it's Nathan Saliba. I think he's one of the good stories of the Losada era.
Yeah.
Um, I think he's someone that honestly I was very skeptical of what he was able to do at the beginning of the season and how he would improve, but he proved me wrong. This player has grown so much in the season. Of course, he has a lot to learn still. He's not a finished product yet, but I think he's very, very interesting. He could grow into a very dominant MLS player, in my opinion, as an 8 or a 6.5 in a certain way. I love his play. I love his vision. I love his ability on the ball, which is very interesting. He needs to maybe try to shoot the ball a bit more. He needs to learn how to shoot the ball. Maybe we haven't seen him shoot the ball enough. That's something that he needs to add to his game. Physicality, he's got a lot better, during the season, which is really interesting. Uh, but I think we have a gem of a player for the next few years. I think he can develop into a very dominant player. I would give him a
Mhm.
6 out of 10 because I was very, very surprised of his growth throughout the year. Elias.
Yeah, I agree with everything, including the grade. I think that it was a perfect example of how to manage a player that's going through a rough spell. Right, he was kind of thrust in the starting role at the start of the season. Clearly, wasn't ready. Took some time off. Came back, won his confidence, and hasn't looked back since. Right, and on top of that, I think he's kind of made himself the front runner for this heir to Samuel Piet's role. We saw a lot of really good things, especially in the ball winning department, and then going forward, that goal against Columbus on decision day is the perfect example. You press high, you win the ball. He plays a perfect through ball into space into Brogier that creates the first
Yeah.
goal. So I think that 10-second clip is a perfect microcosm of what we saw from Natal Saliba and what we could hope to see develop. So just a very well-rounded, and if him and Metzer Chouanière can both get going, and he can kind of follow this progression that Mr. Chouanière's had, then you could be looking at two of the best homegrown 8s in the league, potentially. And so yeah, the sky's the limit, and hopefully he sticks around.
Eve?
Yeah. I will also land on a 6. I don't think I really have anything to add beyond what you guys said. I kind of wish we could go back to like our 3rd or 4th episode of the season and be like, oh wow, we've eaten our words.
Yeah.
So I think you guys overall covered it, and I'll agree with your grade of a 6 out of 10.
Good. Moving on, the next player, and that's yours, Eve, and it's Ariel Lassiter. Out of contract,
Right
by the
on.
way, Ariel Lassiter.
Yes. I would not be against seeing him back in Montreal again next year. I think he offers a degree of versatility, and his work rate is very, very, very excellent. For me, he was kind of like the unsung hero in the Kamal Miller, Bryce Duke, and Gam and Lassiter trade. I think I almost felt like he was thrown in as like an afterthought of sorts. And he actually wound up being very useful for Montreal this season. I think left wing back is not necessarily his dream position, but he has been extremely serviceable in that position. And he has answered the call when he's been called upon. And truly, what more can you ask in that regard? For me, he's hardworking. He has the MLS experience. He knows what you're getting into in this league. And in a league like MLS, especially with all the myriad competitions that get thrown in season after season, you need players who can be versatile and who can slot in at multiple positions, What more can you ask? I am there for Ariel last year. I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10. And Holy Gale is also team ambassador.
Okay. I would say exactly the same thing as you said. I really like the player. He was the unsung hero. Completely agree. He can play in multiple positions, which is really interesting also for a coach. I would bring him back, of course, but with a contract of 150,000 or something like that, and not too expensive for sure. I would bring him back, no problem at all. The only thing that I disagree on is the grade. I would give him a 5 out of 10 because I don't think he's a starter. But he's a very good backup. Who can be a very rotation player.
Yeah, so I think I'm allowing his versatility to kind of like.
Yeah.
I'm just like, because you can be so many places. Yeah. I'm not against your grade.
Elias.
What more to say, Exactly. Nail on the head, 6 on 10. And bring it back. Keep it up. He's absolutely was the bright side of this trade.
Love it. 6 out of 10 for Ariel Lassiter. So the generous people, Eve and Elias, which is very weird. Eve is in the generous people, won this game for this player. Moving on, our good friend Sunusi Ibrahim. Elias, tell us more about the performances of Sunusi.
The roller coaster season. He turns into R9 whenever the Canadian Championship logo is flashed, and then the rest of the season is kind of a coin toss. So it's very, very, very weird. Patrick made a very good point. He had a good finish to the season. He developed a really strong partnership with Mahala Opoku, and he seems to be getting along well with Jonathan Vincent. And if the three of them can kind of get going as a front three, then it would look great, and it would give a lot of different ways that this attack can look next season. So he's still extremely young. People forget that. And I think that he doesn't get enough credit for,
he's 21.
Putting his head down. Yeah, he doesn't get enough credit for just putting his head down and working. Look, he's been with the club now. So his third season with the club?
Yeah.
And look, if he keeps on getting the minutes, it keeps on getting the chances, and he gets into a system that plays to his strong suits.
I agree with that.
I think he's going to be in for a very, very impressive season. I'm going to give him a 5.5 this year, just because he did not have enough consistent minutes to make it stick. But the minutes that we did, we saw a lot of good. We saw some not so good. But even if it's just for Canadian Championship and it helps you win a trophy, then
you know what? I completely agree with everything that you said. The only thing is that when you said extremely young, 21 is the same age.
Extremely young is
so that's the only thing. He's young. He's young, and I think I would still bring him back. 5.5. Completely agree with you. I just need to see him get more stats next year. More goals, more assists. I need him to be more decisive. That's the only thing. But yeah, I'll bring him back. No questions asked. Eve?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen him kind of like Elias said, like against CPL teams or semi-pro teams. He can be so dominant and so clinical and so effective. He needs to really level up his game now to be consistent in MLS. Although there are lots of players, I think, in many leagues around the world who have just been tournament players. And like, that's kind of when they show up and they just have like that weird magic in them. But yeah, no, I'll roll with your grade, and I'll say I would be interested to see another season of Sunusi with some more maturity, with maybe a little bit more of a level head on his shoulders. Yeah.
Interesting. So it's we said 5.5, right?
Yeah.
5. That's
next year we're gonna have to make decimals for sure.
Moving on, Mahala Opoku. I'll start with Mahala. Honestly, he's my player of the year this year. In a way, of course, he didn't play the whole year with us, but I was very, very surprised of the impact that he had on the game, on the team altogether. I love his personality, very positive. I love his play. He's able to run with the ball, but also score goals. He's a complete player, and I really loved what he showed. I think he still needs to work on his shooting abilities, but doesn't shoot a lot from outside the box, or he's more of a poacher. But I think he can develop this thing a bit more. um I'll give him a 6.5 out of 10, because
Mm-hmm.
he did change the whole offensive mindset of the team when he joined the team in a certain way, and I can't wait to see him for a full season with CF Montreal. I'm very excited to his potential starting next season. So 6.5 for me. Eve.
I'll also go with a 6.5. Like you said, I think there's a lot of really interesting potential in this player, and I think he can be a huge standout among the Montreal squad. I think maybe at LAFC he might have been like a medium-sized fish in a big pond, but I think here he can be a big fish in a medium-sized pond. um, and so I'm really, really hoping that he can lean into that if he does have aspirations for his career to go beyond MLS. I also agree with Patrick's take that I'm seeing in our comments here that he can be better, not necessarily as a central striker, but he's been extremely interesting as a winger or playing a little bit more deep lying as a false nine. I 100% agree with that, because he does have a lot better dribbling capability and a lot
Yeah.
better ball to foot technique. So I am there for that as well. And I would hope that the new coach of Montreal will kind of seek to work to maybe deploy him in a role. And I understand as well, probably, it was a little bit of a needs must scenario for Montreal last year because it wasn't working with 04 and so
Yeah.
on and so forth. So yeah, 6.5 for me. And I'm really, really, really interested to see what he can bring next season with a full season under his belt.
I would just agree with the false nine. Don't agree on the winger side. I think we need his finishing abilities, and he needs to be in the middle. That's for me. He's a false nine. That's the best position. That's where I saw the best in him, as a false nine, not as a winger. I think he's going to be too far from goal, in my opinion. Elias,
I actually
prefer him as a
I
winger.
agree, and I don't agree because we're talking about having those inside forwards. If you're gonna play with a three back and you have those overlapping wing backs, you could have your inside forwards where him, Bryce Duke, Jonathan Plissin can play in the half spaces. And Mahala Poko, if he's playing on the right wing, he cuts into the middle anyway. So he will get his playtime in the middle, and he talked about it, right? And he always has a huge smile on his face, but he had an extra huge smile on his face the first game he played as the first full game as a winger, because you could tell he just felt at home. So I think you were talking about a replacement for Georgi Mihailovic and in Bryce Duke. And I think that in terms of pure production of both goals and assists, the real heir for Georgi Mihailovic, or the real replacement, is Mahala Poku. If you're looking at a pure goals and assists and goal contributions, someone that could take on with the dribble, someone that could link up play, shoot from distance, finish, get into spaces that no forward should be getting into. I think that's his spot. I'm going to give him a 6 because, again, not a full season, but absolutely, I can't wait to see a full year with him under a manager.
Interesting. So we said 6.5 out of 10. Okay. So no decimal, so 6.5. So we'll put 6, and then we'll put a 5 right after. That's it. Moving on. Mason Toy. Go ahead. Is it the Elias turn? I think it is Elias turn. So Mason Toy.
I have no idea.
I feel so bad for Mason Toy, because it's really just been like a war of attrition with this guy, and he is supposed to be, this year he was kind of thrust into this role as the eldest and most senior most forward, but fitness and form, it just couldn't find it consistently. He would get hot, and then he would have an off game, and then he wouldn't play for a few weeks, then he'd get hot, then he'd have an off game, and then it was just a very, very vicious cycle. and it kind of falls back into the similar trend we see with a lot of forwards. I'm gonna give him a 5 because of the fact that we saw a lot of good stuff and we saw a lot of not good stuff. And the problem is that when you play so infrequently, you don't always remember the good stuff. You remember some of the bad stuff, and you think yourself, why hasn't he played in a bit? Also because he went a game and a half, and they asked him to play the same way Chino before played, but they're very different players, right? He's much better with the ball at his feet. He's better taking people on with a dribble in open space, and Chino before is a back to goal player. So a good, at least a third of the season was spent with him being asked to play back to goal, which is not his style of play. So I think that I'm gonna give him a 5, purely victim of circumstance and nothing more.
Interesting. Eve.
I am gonna go with a 4 for my grade. I do feel a little bit mean in making this because we did have him on the pod. But that's my choice. It's been several seasons that Mason Toy has been with Montreal, and 2021 he did get off to a flying start, and then his season got ended by injury. And then obviously he came back in 2022 after injury, and that didn't. And, he never caught form after that. And then 2023, once again, injury, came back, had a hot minute, didn't catch form. So unfortunately, the inconsistency has become what's consistent with him. It's been under more than one coach by this point. So I feel terrible. I really like the guy. I really like the player. I really wish things could work out for him, but it just hasn't appeared to work out. I think he's very cerebral. I think there is a lot in his head that maybe holds him back. But for me, it's going to be a 4 out of 10.
Agree with you, Eve. Great guy, but unfortunately on the pitch wasn't enough because of his injuries. And even when he was playing, I think he wasn't clinical enough. Like 99% of the forwards that we had this year. So yeah, 4 out of 10 for me. I think that his future is not in Montreal. So hopefully he'll find a better club for him. So let's wait and see if he has some opportunities elsewhere. But 4 out of 10 for Mason Toy. Moving on, after Mason Toy, who started Mason Toy?
Elias.
You did. Okay.
Elias.
So your turn, I think, Eve, with Jules Anthony Vilsaint. Go ahead.
So there's a part of me that's not super comfortable giving him a grade because he didn't play that much. But I have been really excited by what I've seen from him in his appearances. I do think he has a striker's instinct. I think, he times his runs so very well. He's obviously very young, very inexperienced. And on occasion we can see that, when he does miss a chance that maybe we would consider to be a sitter. And of course we're not out there. We're just sitting on our butts. I'm really excited to see what he can do. I think he does have the potential to be a gem if he is surrounded by other examples of players, and as well if he has a coach who can manage his minutes appropriately and who can really kind of help mentor him into becoming the best version of himself. Do I have to give a number, Hady?
No, you don't have to, because
Okay,
he played under 500 minutes. So
thank you. I feel better if I abstain.
Okay, good. I agree with everything that you said. I wasn't too. I wasn't on the hype, on the train, the hype train.
On the hype train?
Yeah, the hype train of Vilsaint first. I think he's interesting. I just need to see him a bit more consistent on the pitch for sure. And I think it's a project, so let's wait and see how he's going to grow for next year. But if he continues on growing, he's going to be very interesting with the club. So hopefully we'll see that growth beginning of 2024. Elias?
You've all said it all, Hopefully he stays fit. There were a couple of times where he got some knocks, but he's still a young player and still has a huge, super high ceiling from what we've seen. So bring on the next season. Yeah.
Interesting. So we're
Awesome.
all very excited to see our good friend Jules Anthony Vilsan. Last but not least, of course, Victor
Oh
Wanyama.
boy.
I'll start. Victor Wanyama, 5
Complicated
out of
season.
10. 5 out of 10. My grade is 5 out of 10. I think he was very gutsy to go against his coach quite a few times. We all know that he did go against his coach in the dressing room. We all heard the
Yeah.
rumors and the stories. He also did that at the end of year presser. That's a double-edged sword in a certain way. Like, if you do that, you need to make sure that when another coach comes in, you are the best. And you are very, very good. So for me now, Victor Wanyama, I'm going to watch him very, very closely because he needs to show that it was only the coach that made his performance a bit subpar from what we were used to, because he wasn't really good on the pitch. So I'll give him a 5 out of 10 because he was able to show up and to address the issues and be that leader in the dressing room, and even after the season, be that leader, be the one that really took the charge and went ahead and really said, we have a problem. And that's that. On the pitch, he wasn't bad, but he wasn't as dominant. So can't wait to see more from Victor Wanyama and see if he's going to be able to back, his words in a certain way with a different coach next year. So 5 out of 10. Elias.
Yeah, you said it all. I agree with you. 5 out of 10. And I think that if it's any other player, they're getting a 6. But because we know the standard at which Victor Wanyama can play and what we saw on the field, yes, I understand that you don't get along with the coach and you don't get along with the tactics of the coach more specifically, but you've played with a number of different clubs in a number of different styles, and you are still by far the most technically gifted player on this team. So he should have still been able to work his magic in that system. Granted, maybe not as effective as under Wilfried Nancy, but you had to. I would have hoped to see more, and hopefully we will see more under a new coach that obviously has tactics more closer with Wilfried Nancy's, where we saw him play so incredibly well. He's still the best player on the team, I think, and I'm looking forward now that we can start to move on from this very ugly breakup. He can kind of focus on football again. He doesn't have to worry about all this nonsense behind the scenes. And I'm looking forward to a much higher grade next year. But yeah, 5 this year.
Yeah, really complicated, I think, to assess Victor Wanyama. But at the end of the day, I mean, he is one of the leaders on this Montreal team. And lo and behold, I mean, he is technically still with Montreal and Alain Lozada is not. So you have to say that at the end of the day, he was right to probably go against his coach. And yeah, that's a pretty ballsy choice, 110%. But in this case, it appears to have paid off. Of course, it does remain to be seen whether or not he is actually going to be with Montreal next season, because things can certainly change. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, I'll give him a 5 out of 10 as well, just because, again, I don't think we saw enough play from him to properly grade him. Yeah, you know what? He does kind of, I do feel like we do almost have to grade his postseason presser, because we've had Victor Wanyama on The Ball Is Round, and he was so soft-spoken, so gentle, so kind. I mean, his joy at learning about Sam's mom. And then, the side of him that we saw in that presser, I did not know he had that in him. Yeah, so anyway, I'll go with a 5 out of 10. Yeah.
Just to mention, Holy Gale said Victor gets 7 out of 10 based on his end of season spiel alone. So you said 5 out of 10 too?
Yeah, I'll go for 5 out of
Yeah.
10. I'm trying to lean more towards what's on the pitch.
So we're all agreeing on a 5 out of 10. So that's it for our players post-mortem. Like next week, we'll do Olivier Renard. We'll have a few more information in order to rate him very well for the 2023 season. So that's going to be next week, and that will be the end of the post-mortem for the 2023 season. Next week. Moving on, we do have some national team news with Mauro Biello really announcing his squad for the Concacaf Nations League quarterfinals against Jamaica. So that's going to be 2 games for people that don't really know. You're going to have 2 games. So we're going to have one that's going to be, there it is. One that's going to be on the 17th of November, and the other one, the second leg, will be on the 21st of November. Of course, you can see on the screen the other quarterfinals between Costa Rica and Panama, United States and Trinidad and Tobago, and Honduras and Mexico. Very big, it's going to be interesting to see what the team is going to be able to do during that competition. We all know that, World Cup didn't go as well as we hoped for. Gold Cup didn't go as well as we hoped for. So now it's a chance to redeem themselves in a certain way. Do you see it like that, guys?
Yeah.
Eve, do you see it like a chance to redeem themselves?
To a degree, yeah. I do feel like this is kind of when you have to start turning your head towards the next phase, which is obviously 2026, which is where I think 100% of the attention needs to be focused. But maybe for the players who were part of those adventures that you mentioned, who, have probably some not so fun memories, a chance to redeem themselves. But also, it should, emphasis on should, because we'll talk about the reality in just a sec, it should be the opportunity to start looking for, okay, who are going to be my difference makers in 2026?
I agree, but it's also a chance to win silverware. And if you want to grow into a very a good team within the world scene, you need to start winning those, maybe not as good trophies and small trophies in a certain way.
I think when you're a candidate, you have to take what you can get. Take the trophy. If they bust out some sort of tin plate cup, we'll take it.
Elias, how important is it to have that winning mentality and to start really winning something ahead of in the build up of 2026 and the new cycle that is standing in front of Canada soccer right now?
My problem isn't with 2026. You've already qualified for 2026. My biggest problem is if you go into the World Cup with only a Gold Cup under your belt, not a title, a Gold Cup appearance under your belt, when there is the potential of a Copa America, when there's a potential of playing against the best teams in the world in a competitive setting that is match experience you cannot find anywhere else.
Yeah,
Canada got it for 3 games at the World Cup. And every other game they've played competitively has been against teams they play multiple times a year. So my problem now is not with the World Cup. There's going to be a World Cup. There's going to be a dynamite team that will be available to be selected there. And hopefully by then the coaches sort out. My problem right now is I am worried about Copa America qualification. And we're going to talk about it more next week after they've played the first leg. But with the form that Jamaica's in, with the quality of players that Jamaica has, and with the habit that Jamaica's national team has made of upsetting the order of the established order in CONCACAF, this is not as cut and dry as it should be. And it should be, very much the same vein that we saw with the women's team, where you go there, you get the job done. You're not going to win 8-0 on aggregate, but you go there and you should see it through. And now there's way more doubt than there should be. And I think now the big problem is qualifying for Copa America, because missing out on Copa America, it's tough to verbalize just how disastrous missing out on this tournament is going to be.
Oh yeah, that's going to be disastrous. But don't forget that yes, of course, they need to win the quarterfinals. But if they don't, there's a play-in after between the two, between the four losers of the quarterfinals, and two of them can qualify still for the Copa America. I think I agree with you 100%. I think the main focus is the Nations League, because if you're focused on the Nations League, then obviously you're going to go through the quarterfinals,
Yeah,
go
it
to the
goes like hand in
semifinals.
hand.
So it's hand in hand. So obviously you're qualified for the Copa America. So I think we need to win a trophy. And I think also, and that's something that's very interesting, we know that Mauro Biello is an interim head coach. If he has any intent on staying the head coach of that team, he needs to prove that he can go win those games. And we might want him to be the head coach or not. Either way, it is a challenge for him, and it is an opportunity to prove himself to the Canada Soccer deciders. So that's also a test for him, and hopefully he'll do better than his son that got sent off during the U17 World Cup.
Now that was not a very fair call. I don't know if you saw that.
That was absolutely a red card.
It's a joke, of course. He's young. He's 16, Alessandro Biello,
Okay.
but yeah, got sent off.
You made better jokes.
For people that don't know, of course, Canada is playing the U17 World Cup, lost the first game against Spain, only 2-0, with a red card around the 23rd minute, if I'm not mistaken, from Alessandro Biello. So it's still a good result, knowing that you're playing against Spain, which is like, with, of course, the Barcelona player, Mark, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Marc Guiu, who scored a goal and was really, really dominant.
Yeah.
So a good job from Andrew Olivieri and his team in the I think it's Olivieri. Yeah, I think.
It is.
The coach of the U17 Canadian national team. Let's look at the squad that Mauro Biello chose for the quarterfinals against Jamaica. So as goalkeeper, Milan Borjan, Maxime Crépeau, Dane Sinclair. As defenders, Samuel Adekugbe, Derek Cornelius, Alfonso Davies, Luc de Fougerolles, Alistair Johnston, Richie Larea, Kamal Miller, Steven Vittoria. Midfielders, Ali Ahmed, Steven Eustachio, Mark Anthony Kay, Ismail Kone, Jonathan Osorio, Samuel Piet, Tijan Buchanan as an attacker, along with Lucas Cavallini, Jonathan David, Junior Hoylett, Kyle Larin, Liam Miller. Looking at that squad, we have quite a few comments from the listeners here. So first of all, we have Patrick White that says, why is K here? Should be Chouanière. And we have Roberto Tiranardi that says, my two concerns with Canadian men's national team, the Borjan dependency has to end, and who will score our goals. So let's talk about this squad selection, and also at the same time answer the questions of Patrick and Robbie. Elias, I'll let you start. Taking a big pause.
What more do we have to say?
Elias had some passionate feelings while you were away, Hady, about the Borjan call-up. So
well, not just the Borjan call-up again, but the fact that my biggest beef, and again, we cover the national team, but this is a Montreal-based podcast. Mathieu Chouanière was not selected because since CF Montreal didn't make the playoffs, he was worried about match readiness. What? Like, what do you mean? Half the people on this team, half the MLS players on this team didn't make the playoffs. Yes, Kamal Miller is a shoo-in, but Jonathan Osorio, Toronto have not played a competitive game since like July. So I need a better excuse, because that is not the right excuse, Mauro Biello. You need to find a more convincing excuse, other than I forgot to include him or I didn't want to include. There's no valid reason as to why Mathieu Chouanière is not in this group. I've said it a million times. Milan Borjan, Steven Vittoria, people like that. Thank you for your service. Even Junior Hoylett's getting up there. Thank you for your service. But at some point, you have to have the new guard establish itself. And these guys, with all due respect, are just holding up the line. And yes, in terms of pure quality, they may be, still able to play. But if this is a club trying to rebuild after the World Cup and get ready for Copa America in a year, when realistically, I don't know if Milan Borjan or Steven Vittoria will be there. Junior Hoylett probably will be, but those two who are key cogs in this team won't be there. Then why are we not using every single possible opportunity to find out who's going to replace them? Because we still don't know, right? Between Dane Sinclair, Tom McGill, Maxime Crépeau, even, Jonathan Sirois, if he keeps up this form, will insert himself into that conversation. Who's your go-to? Who is your go-to to replace Steven Vittoria? Derek Cornelius had a couple of games where he was okay, but he also had some games where he wasn't great at all. A lot of defenders had games where they weren't great at all. And we still don't know if you are going to move beside next to Kamal Miller, who's going to be that second and or third defender. We don't know because you keep on playing the same guys that won't be there in the big tournaments. So, I mean, I've said it a million times. I'm not going to repeat myself. Play the youth, right? All that stuff. It's disappointing to see the same old faces. And even I talked about this a while back, where we compared some of these guys to made men in the mob, where it's just like you get in there and you are made for life and you are getting selected come hell or high water. And some of them, regardless of performance or age or what the project is for some of the younger players, you are getting called up. And it shows that, these guys just keep on getting in. And if they keep on getting the same results, then what are we doing here?
Yves, I'll let you rebound on that. And at the same time, tell us your thoughts about the squad chosen by Mauro Biello.
I was nonplussed, honestly. I echo much of what Elias said for sure. I didn't attend Biello's presser, obviously, but I can read. So, I know rationale for certain players being selected over others, just like it seemed really discordant, or it just didn't necessarily make sense. Like, so-and-so was not in season, but then we do have players whose competitive seasons ended in October who were called up. So it's just like, okay. Yeah, there are players who are aging out of this squad, and I am all for, when it comes to players who have given so much to this team and this federation, and have been repaid with so little and often with disrespect from the federation, and played in front of virtually empty stadiums and carried this team to Qatar. I'm all for them getting like a proper send-off and a proper thank you. But in a competitive context, I'm trying to word it in like a way that doesn't sound like I just want to shove him out the door. In a competitive context, you do need to be forward looking at the end of the day. Yeah, and I think that's where I'm going to end my sentence in the hopes of ending it gracefully.
Okay, I'm going to be a bit more aggressive in a certain way. Maybe not aggressive, but I don't know. I'm going to take maybe a bigger stand in a certain way. First of all, Milan Borjan. I understand that he's old, 36, but he's still playing with Slovan Bratislava.
Oh yeah,
that's doing very well with in Europa Conference League right now. Drew Lille a couple of times, lost one, but drew Lille the second time around. It was funny because it was David against Borjan in that game in the Europa Conference League. So he's still in a very good club playing in Europe. Yes, of course, not in the Champions League anymore, but still in the Europa Conference League, which is not a bad tournament. So that's pretty good. So I kind of understand the Borjan call. What I don't understand is the Steven Vittoria's call, the Lucas Cavallini call. These call-ups for me are are really the problem for Canada soccer. And you know what? Instead of really, really being hard on the players, I'm going to be hard on Mauro Biello. I'm sorry, but you had a chance to prove yourself, to see that you're different, to show that you're different, to show that, you know what, my predecessor did something which was really good, but at one time, I think, we need to turn the page. And he had the chance to turn the page and he didn't. And for me, that's the biggest problems that I have right now. You're trying to prove yourself as being the next head coach of Canada Soccer, and you're just continuing in the same road, on the same road that John Herdman was already. And what you need is to prove that you're a different coach, that you're something different, that you're better. And you're not proving that. You're doing exactly the same things that he used to do, and taking exactly the same calls that he used to make, which is for me unacceptable, because unfortunately the world is moving. Canada is getting better and better. You have a bigger national pool that you had before. I see Patrick mentioned Joel Waterman. I think he should have been in there. He had a very good season with CF Montreal. Steven Victoria is gone. I'm very happy to see Luc de Fougeral. I think he's going to be very, very interesting, and he can play in a couple of positions. But that's one problem. The second problem is, Mike Anthony Kay has been very good, of course, with the Revolution since he got traded. He's been a starter most of the time. He's been good. I kind of understand that, but at the same time, you do have a player that's Victor Luturi that's playing so well in Scotland, being in the team of the week a couple of times already. Why doesn't have why are we not seeing him in that roster? Why are we not seeing Mathieu Chouanière that's doing very good with CF Montreal? Ali Ahmed has been very good, but most of the time on the bench, and he's an excellent player, but he hasn't been as consistent on the field that Mathieu Chouanière. And up front, I'm sorry, but Lucas Cavallini, you know what? You don't really need him. You already have Kyle Larin, you already have Jonathan David, you have Buchanan, Liam Millar. Like, you don't need to call Lucas Cavallini. Just get another midfielders on the squad. Like, you can take decisions. You're the boss now. And for me, this is unacceptable.
It feels like it was very safe selection.
More than
like
safe.
It was don't rock. No, but it was like don't rock the boat.
But I'm sorry, I'm going to be even more strict. He doesn't have balls. I'm sorry, but he's scared. He's scared of what? It's the Nations League. You're playing against Jamaica. You're higher ranked than Jamaica. You should be confident and show confidence in your selection. But he didn't do that. So hopefully we'll be able to go through and to win against Jamaica. But even if we do, my point will still stand. He was scared. And this is not what we need to see from the next national team coach. And again, I love Mauro Biello, but we need to see more. We need to see someone that's not afraid to take decisions and to take his own decisions and to make his own squad and not follow in the steps of his predecessor. So sorry for being that mean, but that's what I believe in.
That was a stance.
It is a stance. Good. So I think, do you have anything to say on what I just said? Anything to add?
I gave my comment. That was a stance.
Good. Perfect. That's it. That's all, guys. So I hope you guys liked our content today. I think we covered a lot of things. We tried to go as short as possible. Unfortunately, there's too many things that we needed to talk about. Eve, thanks a lot for being here this week. And Elias, too. Thanks a lot. Everybody, thanks a lot for staying with us for an hour and 51 minutes right now. We'll tell you thank you again, and we'll see you next week for another episode of The Ball is Round.